Welcome to another episode of Washington in Focus Daily. I'm Carleen Johnson, the Washington State government reporter for the Center Square here in Washington. And it is Friday, Blue Friday, obviously, go Hawks, day 26 of the 60-day legislative session in Olympia. And it is income tax day here at the Capitol. Senate Bill 6346 is getting its first public hearing since this week's introduction by majority Democrats. We'll get into that a little bit. I'm also going to share more of my Thursday sit-down interview with State Superintendent of Public Instruction, Chris Reykdal, where we discussed the initiatives to the legislature that lawmakers are not taking up concerning parental rights in school and education and keeping boys out of girls' sports. So those are both going to go directly to the fall ballot. So we got into that into detail. And then I wasn't planning on covering this, but earlier this morning, sitting in the wings of the Senate, a bill came up for some passionate debate on the floor, a bill that would erase medical debt interest. That bill ultimately passed off of the Senate floor in a completely party line vote with not a single Republican voting to pass it. But it was very interesting how the arguments went down and how Lieutenant Governor Denny Heck, who presides over the Senate when they're on the floor, basically had to go at ease because he was not pleased with the way the arguments were going. So more on that in just a moment. First, let's talk about the income tax. So the bill that was introduced Tuesday, and as of midday today, nearly 70,000 people had signed in opposition to, is set today for a 1-hour hearing. Now, Senate minority leaders on the committee, the Senate Ways and Means Committee, where that hearing will come up today, on this morning, urged the chair of that committee, Senator June Robinson, to give more time. They've set aside 1 hour for this public hearing, but there's so much interest and so many people that have signed in wanting to testify in person. The Republicans said, given the significance of this, and given that this was just introduced 3 days ago, which violates the 5-day rule, which they can kind of get around, they said, let's have more time. Let's give this thing 2 hours. It is worth it. And she declined. So when I was leaving the Senate wings, I had a couple of members that came up to me that were very upset about the fact that this bill is not being given more time for public hearing this afternoon. And just a quick refresh for folks on this. This is the income tax that would impose 9.9% tax on anyone making more than $1 million a year, or a household that makes that. So you could make $500,000, your spouse makes $500,000. If your household makes a combined income of $1 million or more, you're going to pay an income tax just shy of 10% of that. So estimated it could generate anywhere from $3.7 to $5 billion every year in Washington state. So I'm going to be attending the hearing. We're going to be providing updates. It's going to be, I'm sure, a packed hearing. And for folks that want to watch on TVW, you can always look that up for the Senate Ways and Means Committee session, beginning at 1:30 on Friday afternoon. You can watch that up. It'll be posted, I'm sure, at the conclusion of the hearing today. So let's move on to my sit-down interview that I had on Thursday with Superintendent of Public Instruction, Chris Reykdal. We talked about the initiatives, which I referenced earlier, concerning the protection of parental rights and keeping boys out of girls' sports. Neither of those initiatives are going to get a public hearing, even though they went to the legislature. Majority Democrats have said, we'll pump that to the ballot in November. And so voters will have a chance, even though if you're thinking, deja vu all over again. Yes, these were voted on once and now here they are again, because then they were overturned by lawmakers a year later. So those are going to be on the ballot. So Superintendent Reykdal told me that he was choosing not to really weigh in at this point because it's now a political issue going to the ballot. So I pushed back a little bit in this exchange you're about to see to suggest that it's also his issue as superintendent of public instruction, in charge of Washington's 295 public school districts, and a couple of the girls involved that have asked to meet with him because they've been victimized. That's their language. Not, earning awards because biological boys competed against them, or choosing to sit out because there was a biological male on the opposite team. So I asked him about that. And he launched into claiming that the initiative would require invasive genital exams of girls who want to compete in sports. So here's a little bit of that exchange. They're not going to touch anyone. So that's.
But they're going to verify.
By checking a box that says this is a boy or a girl.
How will they know?
Probably by a physical exam, which doesn't mean touching anyone's genitals.
No, it said that. A physical exam.
No, that's what the other side is saying.
Well, but a physical exam is still visual, which is going to, I will argue, has the potential to drive more girls from wanting to participate, having to go through that, than the dozen or so kids who are trying to participate in varsity sports who are transgender girls. So I'm just saying there is a downside to this that people aren't talking about, and there is a real discrimination risk because only girls have to go through that, not boys. So this has a long legal challenge ahead.
So then we went on to discuss how Republicans held listening sessions earlier this week here in Olympia. Since there are not public hearings scheduled by the majority Democrats, there were listening sessions held by the Republicans. And it was an opportunity for anybody, whether you're for these initiatives or you're opposed, to come and sit down and have a discussion. So I asked Superintendent Reykdal specifically about the two young women that we have reported on extensively, Annalie Wilson and Frances Stott of Tumwater, who've been impacted by trans athletes being allowed to compete in high school sports. So here's another piece of my interview with Superintendent Reykdal about that specific issue. What about those the two girls that have been most vocal in the movement? I know they've asked and called you out, like, we want to meet with you, sit down and hear our story, because they feel that they have been victimized in all of this. Have you considered meeting with them, or would you be willing to sit down with them and just hear their story? Because, they've had impacts because of the policies.
Yeah, there's no role we have in trying to address what happened when one of them used a derogatory term or called out at somebody. Like, there's something that happened in a local school district. That's the local school district figure out. I meet with students all the time on both sides of this. I'm happy to. I am not aware that they have said, we would like to come meet with you or have a video call with you. I'm willing to do that.
Okay.
To listen, because I listen to everybody,
right.
But it doesn't change the fact that there is an initiative out there that people are on both sides of, and the voters are going to get to decide, and then it's going to get litigated.
And finally, for today's Washington in Focus Daily podcast, I did want to bring your attention to Senate Bill 5993, which passed off the Senate floor today on a party line vote. One of the Democrats was excused, but otherwise you had every Democrat voting in support, every Republican in opposition, and there was passionate debate on the floor. So now supporters of 5993 argue interest on medical debt basically just adds insult to injury. So you've got a debilitating disease that you're fighting, and medical debt racks up. You've been in a bad accident, and you've got medical debt that you can't pay off. And, having interest accrue on top of that every year, makes it impossible for many people to pay off. You end up in bankruptcy, that kind of a thing. Opponents say this is going to be, for many, especially rural hospitals, a final death blow for these hospitals who won't be able to, incentivize people to pay off their debt, because if there's not going to be interest and it can't go to collections, many people might just avoid paying off those medical bills. So I got a chance to pull Senator Ron Mazzal of Oak Harbor off of the Senate floor for a minute while they were in recess, when the lieutenant governor gavelled down and said recess, because the floor debate was getting a little heated. And this was a little snippet of the conversation I had with Senator Mazzal.
I agree. It's horrible. One of the high incidents of individuals who have to go into bankruptcy. It's not fair. But now they want to push it out on the rest of us. And those of us out in the country, our hospitals are barely making it now. This is just one more nail in the coffin to sink our rural hospitals. And it's just incredibly frustrating. They claim it's not a rural-urban divide, but it's not their hospitals that are going broke. It's our hospitals out in the country.
So in conclusion, we've got the income tax bill about to get a public hearing. I'm headed over there right now to watch that fiery debate. And we'll keep you posted on how that goes. There will be another story promoting up at thecentersquare.com/Washington before day's end. And I just want to thank you for watching another episode of Washington in Focus Daily. For the Center Square, I'm Carleen Johnson, and go Hawks.